Hi there. My name is Forrest Smith. I'm the product manager for CloudReady here at Neverwhere. And today we're going to be doing a webinar with some help from friends at Neverwhere, who I'll introduce in a moment, on VDI endpoints. So the title we're working with is Assets and Liabilities, because we really want to dive into thinking about how the endpoints that access your VDI can be a big part of whether or not the value of VDI itself is amplified or diminished. So to that effect, I'll be doing a little bit of talking today, laying out what we think the problem is and how we think it can be solved from Neverware's end. And joining us is Casey Cheney. He is a great friend of Neverware's and a veteran of the technology industry, currently with Teradici. So he'll talk to you a little bit about Teradici's huge impact in the world of virtualization and how they view endpoints as well. So to get started, I think it's important, we like to lay out why we at Neverware are here and how we ended up involved in the problem of VDI devices. So in general, Neverware is a company that believes that operating systems can be better, that desktops and laptops are still central to the way that organizations and their employees get work done, but that they really have been a little bit left behind in the progress that we've seen in servers and across sort of cloud computing in general over the last several years. Even as far back as VDI's adolescence in the early 2000s, you can see the technology for VDI growing rapidly and evolving, but endpoints not necessarily really changing how their operating systems themselves are managing the experience. There are some exceptions, and we'll touch on those and what their advantages are. But in general, we think that there's too much complacency with endpoints in VDI, and we think this is costing organizations a lot of money. Not to mention time and effort. So we set out to solve this problem and a bunch of others by building sort of the next end user operating system that we think can be used for a whole lot of purposes. And in this case, what we really want to do is design a solution for modern enterprises that are accessing their VDI, whether it's hosted, whether it's app streaming, or whether it's traditional straight VDI for desktops. And we're doing that by introducing a solution just this week called CloudReady VDI Edition. The goal of CloudReady VDI Edition will be to really create a partner OS that's worthy of the values that VDI is striving to offer you, and to make sure that you minimize kind of the effort and just time and money you spend on the end devices that are really just an access point for the VDI that you're investing your time and energy in. But to get started, I think it's important, before we talk about solutions, to really lay out why we see a problem with endpoints and how we see those values being diminished. If you're already managing some kind of VDI solution, then your organization almost definitely faces security or scalability concerns that are above and beyond the average enterprise. These usually have to do with compliance or the need to secure really sensitive information. Whatever it is, with VDI only in about 9 or 10% of enterprises in the world, it's clear that you have to have major problems and a commitment to the solution in order to need to adopt it. That means that you're really looking for values that will drive solutions to those same problems, things like reliability, manageability, and security that you don't get from a traditional fat client local computing solution. But there's a question: when a VDI customer, when an enterprise that's adopting VDI begins making that transition, and for the years afterwards, they carry a lot of habits forward with them. In particular, the endpoints that they use are deeply ingrained in the way that people get work done and in purchasing cycles for keeping hardware around. And for that reason, a lot of times the same devices that were being used previously are still in place after the transition to VDI is there. So you're changing how and where users are supposed to do their work and get their resources, but you're not necessarily changing the devices that they do those things with, which raises the question: will those devices accessing your VDI support the same values? Will they be more reliable and more manageable and more secure? So we like to do thought experiments to sort of measure that out and to help demonstrate why, unfortunately, the answer may not always be yes. To do that, we'll break down each of those values into a tiny use case here, and hopefully you'll be able to see with me that the habits that users have really drive them back towards the bad behavior that caused these problems in the first place and that drove you towards VDI. And that in order to really keep people using computers the way you want them to and maximizing the value of the investment you've made in VDI, you need to give them clients that support the same values. So when it comes to maintenance, as our first example, you can think of a user who's still on a PC, a traditional PC, opening their machine and getting to work the same way they always would. Excuse me. But as you're shifting most of your applications, if not all, and most of your use cases, if not all, to those VDI servers, you really want to reduce the amount of time you're spending on maintenance for those desktops in order to make sure that all of your applications are in compliance for the security needs that you have, all of your versioning is uniform, and that you can quickly manage rolling back or rolling forward if something goes wrong. When you have a local machine, a user will continue to do some of their work out of habit or perhaps out of the assumption that there isn't a problem on their local machine because that's what they're used to. Upkeeping the version for those things can be really difficult, and even if you manage those devices using strict Active Directory settings to make sure that they can't go out of compliance or install applications that they don't want, which can be difficult depending on the user and their need for permissions, you're still left with the challenge of keeping their OS in place and updated with security patches. OS upgrades can be both disruptive to the user and really difficult to QA in terms of compatibility with your workflows. So you end up with a real tension between keeping users with devices that have as low maintenance as your VDI does, and making sure that they can still do the work that they want to as quickly and as often as they need to. Second, when you think about risk and managing these devices in order to minimize the way that you're exposed when it comes to data or compliance, you really want to think about why your VDI environment is so good for those things. There you have the ability to lock down all access points, all attack surfaces for the VDI instances. But when a user signs on to the same PC, they're driven by those powerful habits I've been talking about in how they use it. And they want to get to work right away. It's best to assume that they'll do their part to follow through with all the guidelines, but that urge is tough to fight when you know that you'll just need to check an email or just need to jot down a note. Once users get started in one of those tasks locally, thinking that it's a really finite task that they'll later migrate to the VDI instance, they get in the habit of slowly leaking work product and data down to that local machine. Maybe they see attachments in emails that they want to access, or they end up being linked to resources that they really should have been only viewing and exposing to the world if they were inside of that secure environment. A lot of times those just actions, those little changes or little skips on the VDI workflows can build up into big problems. So not by any flaw of anyone who's intentionally subverting your technology, but simply by the fact of being human and having habits and having behaviors that aim to avoid inconveniences. If data can be lost and if it can be exposed to outside environments, you can assume that it will be on a device that makes it possible. And for that reason, we think that managing data and compliance belongs in VDI and needs a client that tends to be a little more constructive and a little more in line with those values. And finally, the concept of malicious attacks can be a major problem for a variety of industries, but many who adopt VDI are going out of their way to protect their instances. They feel targeted or are often the subject of kind of random attacks. We like to say that you're only really secure as your end user devices, that despite your best efforts to keep virtual desktops or remote resources safe, if the information in there is being displayed on the screen, and if the user's local device has a conduit for pushing information and actions into your VDI infrastructure, then that device can be compromised and can run local programs that can make changes to your VDI. This effectively means that any device that allows all of that and doesn't have perfect control of which processes run can really be an attack vector to your VDI and bring back the same malicious attacks that you were hoping to get rid of. We live in a world now where local-to-local devices that have no connection can use things like magnetic attacks to flip RAM bits and gain security controls that they weren't supposed to have. So it's crucial to make sure that processes themselves are being prevented. We like to think of it as the difference between getting vaccines instead of taking vitamin C. You don't want to have the possibility of being sick or being compromised. You can't just count on watching and waiting and mitigating damage once it occurs. So with those three things laid out, I'm sure you see neverwhere we want to go with this conclusion. If you're using traditional PCs as endpoints for VDI, they're costing you, and they're not just costing you time or complexity, they're costing you in all of the exact ways that VDI is designed to help you. They're becoming less reliable over time, slowing down, losing their state, losing you data. They're becoming harder and harder to update and manage, and they're not secure in a way that VDI is supposed to be. So we think that you can get more out of your existing investments and that you can drive more value in your VDI if you take a better approach to endpoint solutions, if you make sure that you're tailoring the way that you access VDI just as carefully as you are your VDI itself. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Casey. He's going to talk a little bit about Teradici and what they do in this market and how they view these same challenges that I'm speaking about.
Okay, good. All right, so rather than spin up a more expensive workstation for the conference room, we'd remotely use a remote protocol like TCP/IP, which is Teradici's remoting protocol, to effectively control that workstation from afar. So we kind of got our start there. We then we sort of evolved and did a deal with VMware, and are the underlying protocol for their View solutions. And more recently, we've been working with Amazon Web Services as the underlying protocol for the Workspaces product, and also some stuff that is yet to be announced, but with Microsoft as well. So that's kind of a quick backgrounder on Teradici. We're really we kind of evolved from the initial development of the protocol. We actually evolved into a hardware. We kind of developed a hardware business too for us. You can advance the slides, and we make an SoC, a system on a chip basically called a zero client. So we build a chip. It's called Terra 2, and we sell that SoC to OEMs like Dell and HP and LG and Samsung and about 15 or 18 others, and they build they build what are called zero clients. Some of them are standalone, sort of paperback book-sized computers. Others are all-in-ones where the chipset is designed into the bezel of a monitor. So there's quite a few different form factors. We even see some for specific industries like hospitality, where they're touchscreen enabled, and they've got edge-to-edge glass for so no grease gets ingested. And think of a kitchen or something like that where you want a lightweight endpoint, but you don't you have issues around the environment and smoke, inhalation, and grease, and you don't want spinning fans and things like that. So there's a lot of different sort of industry-specific form factors, as well as kind of your standard information worker desktop replacement form factors in zero clients. So these are the paperback book puck-sized endpoints start at about $200, and the all-in-one, typically 23, 24-inch monitor-based zero clients are in the $400 to $600 range typically. So that's a little bit about our hardware business. We also, in addition to zero clients, we also have a series of hardware acceleration cards and other things that are more for the server side to help move the pixels, if you will, across the network. So we got real excited when we started to discover the opportunity with Neverwhere and CloudReady. I think there's been Forrest touched on this a bit, and I think he will a little more in a minute. But there's been a real sort of hole, I would say, in the market for leveraging existing hardware. I get it. The OEMs want to sell new hardware, but there's just a lot, like Forrest said, there's a lot of PCs out there that maybe maybe aren't running, if they upgraded from Windows 7 to Windows 8 to Windows 10, now they're kind of dragging a little bit, but they still have quite a bit of horsepower. So if you can put a more streamlined, lightweight operating system like CloudReady VDI edition on those endpoints and use them to access a virtual desktop in the cloud or even an on-prem virtual desktop where you're running the actual desktop on a server class computer, and then just effectively bringing the pixels to the endpoint, you can get a lot more life and useful life out of your existing investment in hardware. So I think that's a great opportunity for all those sort of abandoned or fully depreciated endpoints that really still should be fine, but because of Windows and operating system upgrades, they're sort of up against their somewhat short useful life. So anyway, so that's a bit on Teradici. We our protocol, which competes with RDP from Microsoft as well as HDX from Citrix, is called PCOIP. It doesn't mean pixel. It doesn't mean personal computer over IP. It's pixel compression over IP. A lot of people ask me that. So effectively, our protocol is one of the leading protocols for optimizing, packaging, encrypting, and transporting pixels across the web, and then decoding and decrypting them and displaying them on an endpoint. That endpoint can be, like I talked about before, a zero client, or it can be a soft client, including a Chromium, Chrome OS-based soft client that we make, as well as Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, etc. So there aren't too many endpoint types that we don't have something that can run on it. So that's a little bit about Teradici. We also sell a management console that allows you to manage your zero client environment or your hybrid environment if you have a mixed environment. And we also, for those customers that are looking to not just do pure desktops but want to deliver an application as a service, like you've got a specific application that you deliver over the web. I think about the boating exam. They passed a law here in Washington that if you were born after 1960 and you drive a boat, you have to have a special boater's exam. Well, I had to go log into a portal and sign up, and then basically take an exam. I had a time limited exam. That's an example of a web-based application that could just be simply delivered using our protocol directly to an endpoint with either a custom app or a more generic app from Teradici. So we sell that platform to customers that want to build an application as a service or a desktop/VDI scenario on top of our protocol. So I'll be around, obviously, for the remainder of the presentation if you guys have any questions at the end for me, or certainly my contact information will be distributed at the end of this as well. So with that, we can head to the next slide. And back to you.
Thanks so much, Casey. I think it's worth saying before we move on, one of the things that Neverwhere really loves about working with Teradici is that they sort of have set the tone for what we think is important about virtualization, because though they're all involved in a variety of solutions from hardware to software to services, because they make PCOIP and understand so well that fundamentally it's about transferring resources over the network from a server to a consumer device. They're really focused on those devices being kind of the platonic form of what they need to be, being light and simple and easy to manage and secure, so that they only do one thing well, which is display and interact with those remote resources. That's really been a big part of the inspiration behind the solution that Neverwhere now is entering into the VDI market with, CloudReady VDI Edition, and what I'm going to talk to you about. So we were really excited to be able to include Casey and Teradici's both opinions and philosophy on things, as well as their products and solutions in this webinar. So thanks again, Casey. All right, so CloudReady VDI Edition. We're really interested in making sure that we take this OS that we have, CloudReady, which I'll mention some of the features of, and provide this ideal client solution. We think that people have been coupling their hardware refreshes and their VDI solutions and their technology choices about management all together for a long time in a way that doesn't have to be true. And we really want to offer a solution that works immediately for folks, lets them adopt the technologies, the vendors, the hardware that they want to immediately, whether that's what they have or what they're going to. And so we've designed CloudReady to hopefully provide for those needs. So first, we really want to talk about hardware flexibility. Like I said, hardware refresh cycles are often tied to the solutions that they connect to. So if you're buying thin clients, you have to buy the right thin clients for the vendor or technology that you want. And you can't switch vendors without switching hardware. Or perhaps you feel that VDI is best suited to thin clients or zero clients, but you have a whole lot of PCs and Macs or x86 tablets. All of this logistical juggling to try and figure out when and how you can switch to the right solution for you is something that we built CloudReady VDI Edition to end. So we're providing an operating system that you can install on virtually any PC or Mac or thin client made in the last 10 years. We optimize compatibility for everything from graphics hardware acceleration to trackpad functionality. And we do all this because we want people to be able to choose a VDI vendor to switch to, no matter which one it is, or choose CloudReady itself as their solution for their clients without having to think twice about the hardware they've invested in, whether or not they'll see returns on that, or how long they can keep using it for. So not only do you get more out of those assets because CloudReady simplifies the way they work and makes sure that the local lag built up from Windows and Mac is removed, but you also get to kind of independently choose between buying the right hardware for your workers and for your company and buying the right solution from an OS and management standpoint. And on the topic of management, CloudReady VDI Edition is really the only solution on the market today that lets you put Chromebooks and thin clients, Apple hardware, and PCs, whether they're net new or aging, all under one management console. And that's because we've built CloudReady to leverage Google's Cloud Management Console and to have that be a covering full management solution, including configuring your which VDI server, whether it's in the cloud or local, that you point to, for all of these devices all in one. So that means PCs, Macs, and thin clients that you convert using CloudReady VDI Edition will show up there and be fully managed there. And on top of that, if you decide to adopt Chromebooks as thin clients, you'll be able to see those there as well. This is a cloud-based management console, which means that you can access it from any web browser and that all of the CloudReady devices that you deploy will be constantly in contact with that server, getting pushed updates almost instantly whenever you make those changes. And that gives you an incredible amount of flexibility and an incredible amount of trust in the solution, because you can choose at any time to lock down a device, to remotely wipe a device, to force restart a device, or even to gather logs to see how performance is. You can get notifications if the device stops functioning or hasn't been accessed in a certain amount of days. It's really a management console that's built around the idea that you need specific information to keep these simple, lightweight, streamlined devices running, but you don't need a whole ton of settings outside of that. That might complicate things, might cost you extra man hours, or in the case of local PCs, might mandate that you make full hires just to keep expertise in-house on how to run it. This is something that's really built for VDI to let you focus on the VDI side of things and keep the clients simple. Importantly, we'll talk about price on this solution in a little bit, but one of our favorite parts of this solution is that the management comes with the CloudReady licenses at no additional cost. We really think it's important that management be thought of as part of the solution, not an add-on or an optional, and so we include it in every CloudReady license is manageable out of the box. Next, CloudReady is secure in a way that very few other devices can claim. It's an operating system that's really been redesigned to have security foremost in mind. To go back to what I mentioned earlier, that analogy about vaccines versus vitamin C, CloudReady has a 12-partition system that is built around process sandboxing, statelessness, and remote control of that management console. All of those things combine together to sort of rule out entire classes of insecurities. Processes only run with the permissions that are explicitly granted to them by either you, the administrator, or by Google in defining what those processes are. And even those permissions are still sandboxed so that nothing can get out or propagate from a process that was unwanted. Only the things that you anticipate can run. On top of that, any stateful information that does make it onto the device, like wireless or network controls or locally cached configuration files, is encrypted on a user-by-user basis, making sure that not only will you be able to have these devices be shared without any risk in case you have contractors sharing devices with local employees, but you can also trust that if a device gets stolen, even after you lock it down, the hard drive can't be removed and looked at to gain stateful information or any kind of insecure information leak, because everything will be encrypted in its own separate file system. Finally, as I talked about with the management, the ability to remotely lock and wipe these devices gives you a really easy sense of trust that for aging devices that you hand out to insecure use cases like traveling employees or contractors, you can trust that if there's loss or theft, you'll be able to rapidly and in real time lock down that device, get a notification that it's been taken out of management or hasn't been turned on in the time frame that you expect, and make sure that no one can access the things that have been left on it. So that really helps you envision how in a fully baked solution, you might still have uses for CloudReady where you have devices that are going out to folks that you don't necessarily know you can count on to interact with again, or where it's really important to you that the devices be ostensibly disposable. Okay, finally, CloudReady VDI Edition is built to give you as many options as possible. And we've already talked about how the options on the hardware side really help. But another option that you get is to choose any vendor or many vendors. We talk to a lot of folks who, over the years, accumulate several VDI deployments from different vendors. Maybe they have a mix of Citrix and VMware, or maybe they're in transition from one of those two to Amazon Workspaces, or maybe one works better for rapidly scaling up. So they have a scaled one and a steady one. Whatever the case is, we like to make sure that you're able to switch between those vendors as rapidly as you want on a client-by-client basis or in groups. And the management console system lets you configure a different vendor and configuration file for the client app of VMware and Citrix and Workspaces and anything else that you might imagine connecting to in separate groups to switch between them seamlessly, so that an employee can, in 1 week, go from one vendor to another, or a company can, over the course of just a month, without replacing any of their client-side technology, update from one vendor to a new one. This makes everything extremely simple. It gives you the most direct possible connection to those vendors' configurations as possible, again, so that you can spend your time focusing on how the VDI itself is managed from vendors like Citrix and VMware and Workspaces. And we like to think of this as future-proof. We use software clients here so that you can rapidly switch, and so that if something new comes, you can switch to that new client and start accessing right away. You'll be able to test new solutions using CloudReady without getting new hardware for a demo or without doing a major conversion in order to see what it looks like. And you'll be able to make the choices that you need to, again, decoupled from the hardware choices you've made. You'll be able to switch when you want to, when you think it's right for the business, not when it's convenient for the hardware buying cycle. So in the end, we think that there are a lot of good solutions, but for VDI access, CloudReady makes the most sense, especially if you have a distributed fleet of different kinds of hardware, or if you're worried about decentralized management, or if you're just looking to make sure that you have the most secure operating system architecture underlying what you have. We're no longer in a place where simple Linux thin clients are guaranteed to be virus-proof. There are exploits in the Linux kernel all up and down, so it's important to have a system of running processes and allowing permissions that rules out any risk in the first place. We think hardware freedom and flexibility with vendor makes a huge difference. And of course, when you're thinking about using traditional PCs, you always want to be thinking about whether or not you're ending up paying for Windows twice, both in the VDI and on the local device. That can be one of the most costly mistakes, and while hopefully you and the vendors that you work with are avoiding that, we've seen a lot of cases where it happens to be true. That money can be put to better use, and most technologists can put their time to better use than managing Windows twice, and that's why we think CloudReady is a great option. So again, it's CloudReady VDI Edition. I don't have a slide to show this, but the solution is $49 per device per year, starting MSRP, and there are volume discounts, and we're offering the solution with management included. So you will get full support, deployment support, as well as ongoing tech support, and the operating system and management coupled together for $49 per device per year. That's all we have planned in advance. I think we'd love to take a couple of questions if you have any for us here at Neverwhere or for Casey from Teradici. But before we get into that, we're really grateful that you joined us, and we're really happy to be offering this new solution. So please get in touch now or later if you have any questions or you're interested in trying the product.